And what did I say since day one? Consumers pay 100% of all costs of production. A tariff is just a tax, you dummies. The whole thing is about to fall apart. And nobody is paying any attention. You've got to cut the size of government spending by 50% to have a chance to avoid a disaster. Our enemy isn't China. Our enemy isn't the Soviets. Our enemy are the goddamn kleptocrats in Washington, D.C. They're the ones who have all the guns and all the power, and they're going to take more money from you until they destroy our economy. The government is the biggest threat to your safety, your sovereignty, and your wealth in the world by far.
Welcome to the Porter & Company Black Label Podcast, your home for provocative insights that lead to lasting wealth. And here are your hosts, Porter Stansberry and Aaron Brabham.
Porter, welcome to another Black Label show. I'm not with you in studio. I am down in the city of Eternal Spring. It is 78 degrees and sunny here. How's the weather in Baltimore doing right now, Porter? How's it been this winter?
Brother, we can't start on the weather, okay? We had a huge day in our path towards the end of America today.
Yes.
And so many things that I have been warning about that would occur happened today. And you want to bust my balls about the fact there's been 18 inches of snow on my farm for the last 6 weeks.
I figured if I
what
got you
we're getting
riled
on
up
Sunday?
about that.
More snow, Brabsy, more snow on Sunday.
I figured if I got you riled up about the weather, you'd be really riled up about the end of America stuff. All right, Porter.
Man, you can't get me more riled up, man. You can't. I'm already there. there.
Okay.
So, so hang on. We're going to remember there's not going to be an end of America because Trump's going to save us. Don't you remember that, Brabsy?
Yeah, he's draining the swamp.
He's gonna drain the swamp. He's gonna cut $1 trillion in spending. $1 trillion. We're gonna Doge. We're gonna figure out all the corruption in the Pentagon and in Medicare and in Social Security. We're gonna fix the government. We're gonna make the government work for the people.
Abolish the IRS. Send checks to people.
We're getting rid of the IRS. I forgot. Getting rid of the income tax.
Yeah.
Yes. And by the way, foreign governments are going to pay to build the wall.
Yep.
The foreign government's going to pay all of the taxes. We're going to make America great again. What no one was paying attention to was all the things that Trump was promising. We're going to make the government great again. That is not going to make America great again. That's going to absolutely bankrupt us. And the whole key proposal was that he was going to add these enormous tariffs onto our economy, and it wouldn't cause higher prices. It wouldn't cause a slowdown in our economy. It wouldn't cause a reduction in gains to productivity because Germany, Mexico, Canada, China, they're just going to pay for all these bills. And what did I say since day one? Consumers pay 100% of all costs of production. And a tariff is just a tax, you dummies. And raising the taxes on the American economy by $300-400 billion a year, that is not going to happen without a lot of pain. Yeah. So the government has collected $166 billion in these taxes, and now they're going to have to return it all.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Porter. I mean, you horse laughed from the beginning, and you know, we got a lot of hate in the emails. There was so much optimism, and
I still am getting hate. I wrote about it on X today, and people are like, "That's a travesty of a Supreme Court decision." I'm like, "Have you read the Constitution? It's like Article 1. Only Congress has a power to levy a tax. And why is that? It's designed to protect your sovereignty, you moron. You shouldn't want a king in Washington who could just lay a tax on anybody he wants to. That's got to go through the legislature. Your representative have to vote on it so that you get to see how they vote so that you can then elect them or not reelect them. But none of these numbskulls know the first thing about the Constitution or about economics. And they want to believe that somehow magically the government can solve all these problems. It can't. The government's actually completely broke. They owe $40 trillion, and they cannot even afford the interest on the debt anymore. It can't. It's unfinanceable. And meanwhile, they've got another $100 trillion plus of liabilities and all the goodies they've promised to the Social Security recipients that is unfunded. The only asset Social Security has are the bonds of a bankrupt government that are going to be in default. The whole thing is about to fall apart, and nobody is paying any attention. Most of all, the MAGA people who think that somehow Trump can print money even better than Biden did. No, it's going to be the same problems. You've got to cut the size of government spending by 50% to have a chance to avoid a disaster. And there is no stopping this train. There's no way it's going to happen. So get ready. Here it comes.
Yeah, I mean, we just lost most of our listeners because you hit that nail on the head with the Social Security. They don't like hearing that, Porter. They don't like to hear about their Social Security.
It isn't funded, folks. There is nothing there.
Nothing.
The only way you're getting paid Social Security is by taxing people who are under the age of 40 who can't afford a house, and that is going to destroy the entire society. So enjoy it. Enjoy your ridiculously expensive health care that doesn't make you live any longer at all, but is bankrupting our country. That's a great idea. Let's have more of that. And by the way, if you don't think there is endemic rampant fraud in Medicare, you're absolutely out of your mind. I saw some analysis the other day, something like some crazy number, like 10% of the entire Medicare budget was going to one zip code in Brooklyn, where it was a whole cast of shady characters. We're not going to name which ethnic group they're a part of, but a whole ethnic community group that was where all these were supposedly home healthcare providers.
Yeah, absolutely.
It ain't just the Ethiopians or the Somalis in Minnesota who are running this.
It's everyone. It's literally everyone. I've come to realize, you've talked about it for a long time. Of course, the Department of War failed their 8th audit or whatever. There's like $20 trillion over the lifetime missing, unaccounted for. And I've come to realize, Porter, that very few of anyone, quote unquote, productive is actually productive in a creative, value added way. It's just scams and frauds. That's all that most of the economy and all of every government is based upon, are scams and frauds.
Think about how little primary education public school teachers achieve.
No.
So you measure the results of the students when they go in, you measure the results of the students when they come out. They're spending $28,000 a year in Baltimore City public schools. None of the graduates can read.
That's unbelievable. Yeah, there's no math skills, and they can't even read. They're not even literate. No. Which is crazy.
And by the way, they fixed this, and interestingly, they fixed this recently in Mississippi. How did they fix it in Mississippi?
Yeah, what'd they do?
They refuse to graduate students from one grade until the next if they can't read at grade level. So it doesn't matter how many times you've got to take 4th grade again. You're not going to 5th grade until you can read at 5th grade level. Makes sense, doesn't it? At least then the teachers are responsible, because if 3/4 of your class doesn't graduate, you're not doing the job.
Yeah, and then with AI, there's always benefits and there's always consequences, right, for any type of new technological innovation. And I just, I laugh sometimes, Porter, because I think about your side hustle in college, and your side hustle was writing papers for other students,
for my wealthy fraternity brothers who were lazy as sin.
and you guaranteed an A.
No, I didn't guarantee an A. I guaranteed an A or a B.
Or a B. That's fine. I'm sure they were happy. But you probably got A's most of the time. And I remember asking you, I go, well, Porter, like a lot of those courses, you weren't even taking those classes.
I wasn't taking any of them.
Yeah, I'm just you're an avid reader, and you have the ability to formulate your own thoughts.
You give me 8 hours in a library, and I can write you 30 pages on anything in the world. And by the way, this was before we even had like computerized libraries. I had to actually go open a book and take notes.
Yes.
But still, you give me 8 hours, I can figure out enough to fake it, at least for a dumb university professor who doesn't know any better.
Yeah, exactly. And I just can't even imagine kids these days ever doing any type of research.
I got to tell you the funniest thing that happened with that. So I did this for 3 years at University of Florida, and I probably wrote something like 25 papers in that 3-year period, and I charged $1,000 for each paper. That was enough money to get me through school, and I was also lifeguarding at Disney on the weekends. So that was enough money for me to survive. And there are just two things about this. One is I never put my name on the paper.
Right.
So somebody else did the cheating. I did the research.
Yeah, that's right.
Second of all, one of the things I wrote, I did for free. One of my roommates, his mother died of cancer while we were in college. and he was a train wreck. He wasn't able to get much of his work done. And so he was taking a literature course, and I wrote a paper for him.
Did you fail your friend?
He won a literary prize.
What? That's amazing. That is amazing. Oh man, that could have gone either way. That could have gone real bad, or it could have been interpreted as some piece of literature.
So, I can't believe we didn't get caught, because this kid hadn't even been in school all year, and suddenly he's writing this treatise.
Yeah.
But anyways, I'm digressing terribly.
Yes.
What's important is that the idea that Trump is going to solve our country's problems by generating more revenues for the government and spending more money in the government is going in the absolutely wrong direction. And I really do think the Republicans are going to get completely trounced in the upcoming midterm elections. They're going to lose control of the House and the Senate. And I think it'll be impossible for them to win the presidency next, too. And that is really bad news, because Trump knows better. Mm-hmm. But the Democrats don't. They're going to go full commie on us.
Yep.
I mean,
well, we're going to have
what's her name, AOC, running for the presidency.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And people will be cheering it on, and it'll be madness, and it'll make what's going on right now look like a walk in the park. But I mean, yeah, there's no way the midterms are won, and America's lost. This is the end of America. This is the end of the dollar. Like, this is it. I read the other day, it was on X, and it was only there for a day, but it was like, Russia's going to back the dollar. They're coming back to the table. And I was like, this has got to be the biggest piece of garbage from Bloomberg I think I've ever seen in my life. And of course, the next day, the Russian, government was like, we're doing none of that. That's why we're BRICS. We learned our lesson with SWIFT.
I did see one of the Trump people come up with a really original idea, which was to audit the Fed's gold and see if it's really there.
Which they didn't do.
And then if it is there, have it back a new 50-year bond that would offer you the alternative of being paid in gold or being paid in dollars. No question that bond would sell very, very well.
Yes.
But the idea that the government would actually pay you back in gold never would happen in a million years. This is the same government that stole all the private gold in the country in 1933. It's the same government that took all the gold out of Europe during World War II and never would return it.
Yep.
You guys, if you believe that the government is here to help you, you've got to get that out of your mind. The government is the biggest threat to your safety, your sovereignty, and your wealth in the world by far. Our enemy isn't China. Our enemy isn't the Soviets. Our enemy are the goddamn kleptocrats in Washington, D.C. They're the ones who have all the guns and all the power, and they're going to take more money from you until they destroy our economy, and that is what is going to happen. Mark my words.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Porter, let's switch gears a little bit. And now that we've depressed people about the future of America and what's going to happen, let's actually find something that we can help with. Our guest is a doctor. He's a famous author. He's got some breakthrough ideas. He's got a ton of knowledge on controlling, or let's say identifying, hunger. And then once you identify the hunger, then you have the ability to actually control your weight, maintain your weight, lose weight. And it's
a revolutionary new idea about weight loss. His name is Dr. Jason Fung. And as you'll see in our interview, because I'm going to bring it up, he's also a longtime subscriber to my newsletters.
All right, Porter. Well, let's bring on a very special guest right now, longtime subscriber and friend of the show, Dr. Jason Fung.
Jason, it's so great to see you. Thanks for being here. For those of you who don't know, Dr. Fung is a world-famous author, and he's also been a customer of mine for more than 22 years, 23 years maybe. Basically, as soon as I got started in the newsletter business, Jason Fung signed up for my letter. Dr. Fung, how long ago was it that your first book came out, the Obesity Code?
That came out in 2016, so I started writing around 2014, 2015, yeah. But I've been reading you for, many years before that.
So I don't know exactly how long ago it was. It was 3 or 4 years ago. My girlfriend, now wife, started telling me I really have to read this book because she wanted me to lose some weight, as everyone does. And And I was like, huh, that's odd. A guy with the same name is always writing into our mailbag on the journal every day. And I didn't put the two together for a while. And then once I did, I reached out to you, maybe 6 months ago, and said, let's get together in New York. And we had a wonderful dinner with your two sons and my wife. And you've been working on a new book, and we're grateful that you've come on to talk with us about it. I want to warm you up and warm the audience up by telling you have a really neat approach to what's behind the obesity epidemic. And what you're explaining to people is it's not about calorie counting. It's actually about dealing with hunger. Can you talk about how you came to that realization through your medical practice, and sort of give us the thesis of your new book, The Hunger Code?
Yeah, the idea is that if you think about calories in, calories out, this is sort of the approach that is taught basically universally. So I learned it in medical school, virtually everybody learns it, but it's actually not true. So this idea that you just have to eat fewer calories and you're going to lose weight is completely false. First of all, it doesn't work, right? So everybody's done it. We've all tried it, and it really just doesn't work. Every scientific study shows that when you give people this sort of advice, they lose weight for about a few months, 3 to 6 months, and then they gain it all back. And that's the experience of virtually anybody you talk to. And I've talked to a lot of people who've tried to lose weight.
Yeah, I've done the 50-pound round trip like 4 times in my life. And my body keeps wanting me to look like this. And I keep trying to fight it.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. So the whole idea is that if you simply eat fewer calories, then what's going to happen? Well, you're going to get hungry, right? So if you eat the same thing but less, well, you're going to get hungry, and then you're going to want to eat more. So it's going to fail in the long run because you're constantly fighting with your body, right? So the idea if you restrict calories, calories is going to go down, but hunger is going to go up. You're not going to win. So if you look at something like Ozempic, like the weight loss drugs, it's completely different. Instead of trying to restrict calories, what they do is affect the hormones that affect hunger. So as you drop the hunger, you'll also eat less, but now you're not fighting with your body because that's the whole idea. So hunger is actually the sort of root cause. And it makes sense because if you think about it, there's sort of this universal truth that we never sort of acknowledge, which is that we eat because we're hungry and we stop eating because we're full. If you simply think about it that way, you realize that the hunger is what you need to focus on because the calories and how much you eat is sort of downstream from that, right? So I use this sort of concept called the 3 whys, and this is a concept in logic, which says that if you really want to get to sort of the root cause of any problem, you really have to ask the question why 3 times. So if you think about a question like, why did the Titanic sink, for example? You might say, well, because it hit an iceberg. And that's actually the wrong answer because it doesn't give you any useful advice. Because if you think about it, what would you do to prevent future marine disasters? Don't hit icebergs.
Don't hit icebergs. Yeah, that's not going to help.
That's not helpful, right? Because you stopped at the first why. You stopped at this sort of shallow, superficial understanding of what the actual problem was. So then you have to go to the second why, which is why did the ship hit the iceberg? And the answer is the captain couldn't avoid it in time. And you get to the third why, which is why couldn't the captain avoid it? And the answer is because he was going too fast. So when you say, how do you avoid future disasters? You say, slow down. And that's a much more useful advice, right? Same as if you are on an icy road and you fly off the corner. You got into the accident because you're going too fast, not because the, friction of the road was exceeded by the speed of the centrifugal, or whatever you want to say, right? That's how it happened. It's not why it happened, right? Same with the calories in, calories out. So we know that body fat, which is a store of calories, is simply the, is calories in minus calories out. So that's true. But it doesn't mean that if you simply eat fewer calories that you're going to lose weight because your body can simply reduce the number of calories it burns, right? So it's just like if you have money in the bank, right? That's a savings, right? Is money in the bank equals money in minus money out. So you might say just make more money, right? But again, making money and saving money are 2 totally different things, right? You have these NFL players, NBA players who make $30 million a year, and 3 years after they retire, they're bankrupt, right? Why? They didn't save any money, right? So they're different. So it's really what does the body do with those calories, right? Does it burn it or does it store it, right? So there's two sort of separate concepts here, and that's controlled by your hormones, right? It's all due to your hormone. Everything in the body is run by hormones, as well as the hunger. So that's how it works, right? Your body adjusts how it wants to be. And it gets back to your point, which is this sort of idea of a body fat thermostat, right? So a thermostat is something that sets an ideal temperature, like for your room. If it gets too hot, it turns on the air conditioning. If it gets too cold, it turns on the heat, right? Either way, it's going to get a stable setting, right? And this in biology is called homeostasis, and it's a core biological principle. So if you have a body temperature of 97 degrees, it gets you're sweating, you get too hot, you're sweat. You get too cold, you're going to shiver, right? Either way, you're going to get back to that ideal temperature. And body fat is no different, right? Your body actually has a setting where it wants to be. And if
can we turn my setting down a little bit?
That's the key. You have to know how to turn that body fat thermostat down, right?
And I can tell you that I have found one thing that actually does that. And I wonder if you can tell me if this is my imagination or if there's something to this. The times when I've been most effective at weight loss are, number one, times when I wasn't working. So when I retired in 2019, I lost like 50 pounds without even thinking about it, without even noticing. And then the second thing was when I learned how to fast and when I would meditate. And so I was fasting once a week. I was meditating every day, and I was, as you probably can imagine, I was never hungry. My body got used to a lower calorie input, and I wasn't under any stress. I didn't have cortisol. I wasn't full of insulin. And so it was very easy for me to not get hungry.
That's exactly right. What you're describing is exactly right, because if you think about it, the body sets that sort of set point, right? That thermostat, right? And there are certain hormones that push it up and certain hormones that push it down. So the two key hormones, which I covered in the obesity code, is insulin and cortisol, right? Cortisol is the stress hormone. And you know this because if you take somebody and simply give them insulin, they're going to gain weight. Obviously, if they gain weight, it means calories in is greater than calories out, which again is sort of how you gain weight. It's not why you gain weight. You gained weight because you got all this extra insulin. But the insulin tells your body to store more body fat, right? Just like the cortisol. You can do the same thing with cortisol. So if you take a drug called prednisone, which is used for all kinds of diseases, right? So asthma and other diseases. If you give people cortisol, they gain weight. What it tells you is that the cortisol is pushing that body fat thermostat up. And if you're under a lot of stress all the time, your cortisol levels are going way up. That's why it wasn't the calories that was the problem. That was just the superficial don't hit iceberg sort of advice, right? The problem was that your body fat thermostat was getting pushed up with the cortisol. And when you're able to bring it down, that's when you could lose weight. Same thing with the insulin.
I did notice that too. When I lost $900 million, I gained a lot of weight.
And that's how the body works, because when you push that, that cortisol spiking, you're pushing that thermostat up. And what's going to happen is that your body then activates your hunger signal, right? Your emotional eating, and you're just wanting to eat all the time. So
yeah,
if you
I wake up in the morning, I'm starving.
Yeah. And if you say just eat less, that's like telling an alcoholic, just drink less alcohol. It's like, does that work? No. Because you never got into the reason that they were drinking the alcohol, which is maybe depression, maybe addiction, whatever. So if cortisol, just like a room thermostat, the thermostat itself does not adjust your temperature. It activates, heat, shivering or sweating or whatever, right? Same thing with your body. When you start pushing that thermostat up, what's going to happen is that your body's like, oh, you're not fat enough, right? That's your thermostat's up. You gained that weight. Let's increase that hunger. And then you start eating. The opposite happens too, because if you look at GLP-1, which is glucagon-like peptide 1, which is the hormone pathway that Ozempic works on. It pushes the thermostat down. It has nothing to do with willpower. Everybody thinks weight loss is you white knuckle it until you lose the weight. No, you don't. You actually have to push that thermostat down. Then what happens when you push that thermostat down because you've activated the GLP-1? Well, your hunger turns off because your body's like, you're too fat. You need to stop eating. So then your hunger disappears and then you lose the weight. But it's understanding that there's this sort of homeostatic mechanism. Because some people say that, our bodies are designed to store fat and that's why we gain weight because calories are so easy to get now. And that's just really stupid because if you think about wild animals, you'd never see morbid obesity. Why? Because animals would die. If you're a predator and you're morbidly obese, you'll never catch anything ever again.
I would be a very hungry cheetah.
Exactly. And if you're a rabbit or a deer and you're a morbidly obese, you're going to die because somebody is going to kill you and eat you, right? So how much body fat you carry is actually very important and governed by this homeostatic mechanism. But you have to understand it's driven up or down. It can be adjusted. And then that activates hunger as the sort of mechanism that it goes through.
So what's the link between hunger and the resulting obesity and ultra processed foods? Because I definitely have seen that when people are eating ultra processed foods all the time, they get beyond just a little. I like to refer to myself as husky.
Yeah,
they get quickly beyond husky, and they get to the size where it's like, oh my God, it's coming at me, kind of big.
Oh yeah, and ultra processed foods are actually bad on a number of different levels. And in fact, in the book, I call it the golden rule number 1 is actually avoid ultra processed foods. And there's a reason for that. So if you get back to the 3 whys, you say, why are you gaining weight? And you say, well, because calories in is greater than calories out. Okay, that's the first why, right? Then you say, why is calories in greater than calories out? So the answer is because you're hungry, right? And then the third why is, why are you hungry? And that's the most interesting because there's actually multiple types of hunger. There's at least 3 different types of hunger. So there's the homeostatic hunger, which is that sort of physical hunger where your stomach is growling and stuff. And that's driven by your hormones. Satiety hormones like GLP-1 or hunger hormones like ghrelin. But there's also a completely separate type of hunger called hedonic hunger. And hedonic refers to, and this is the sort of emotional hunger, right? So hedonic means relating to pleasure. And this is the thing, eating is pleasurable. People go to eat because you enjoy it, right? That's the only reason you eat dessert, because you've already gotten full. You eat dessert because you want to, because it gives you pleasure or it gives you comfort.
I'm usually full by the time the appetizers are finished. That's one of my lines at big dinners is, oh, these appetizers are great. I'm full. Let's have dinner. Yeah. So definitely food is definitely, I'm eating it oftentimes for pleasure. And I guess I'm eating it to give myself relief from the stress I have felt all day.
Exactly. And the thing about ultra processed foods is that it turns it up to 11, basically. So if you look at the way that ultra processed foods are made, they're specifically engineered to increase hedonic hunger while decreasing satiety, right? Why? Because
they're like the social network of foods. Like, you know how
right.
Facebook and that are designed to stimulate your dopamine so you won't stop looking at your screen. They've done the same thing with food.
Yeah. And it's not by accident, right? So Facebook tries to pretend it's not an accident. But of course, they're doing it to make it addictive, right? TikTok and all those places, because they want to sell ads and stuff. Same thing with the food companies. So the food companies have taken it and turn it up. And there's multiple ways they do that, right? So there's texturizers to give you the proper mouthfeel. There's emulsifiers. There's artificial colors. There's artificial sweeteners. There's the artificial fats. There's there's all kinds of things. And the other thing is that they make it very easy to eat. So they're extremely soft. Like the stuff just melts in your mouth. Like if you think about a cheese puff or something, it just melts in your mouth, right?
A little Debbie.
And it just goes right in. And the thing is that because it gets absorbed so quickly, the glucose and stuff, it just spikes everything. Your dopamine spikes really high. And therefore you get this big, massive hit that you don't get with natural foods. At the same time, they've dialed down satiety so you don't get full when you eat these things, right? So, say you finish your, 48-ounce steak, right? And somebody says, here, have this pork chop. You'd be like, blah, right? But if somebody said, hey, have a bit of apple pie, you'd be like, yeah, I can do that, right? Because the satiety is turned down, right? And that's the whole point.
I'm full, but that's no reason to miss dessert.
Exactly. We've all done it, right? So why would we pretend it doesn't exist, right? Why do we pretend that we can simply say, oh, I won't do it because of the calories? But you're not eating because of the calories. You're eating to satisfy that sort of emotional hunger. And the
ultra processed foods trigger that very, very directly.
Yeah.
And I want to get to the strategies for dealing with all these things, but I got two things have occurred to me. One is your statement about how the food companies have invented all this stuff reminds me of one of my favorite lines from Chevy Chase and the movie Christmas Vacation, when he actually wins an award for inventing the best non-food additive at his company. So it's certainly a part of American culture. The second thing I wanted to ask is, you said, these ultra processed snack foods that are so addictive, they're also very easy to eat, right? You open up the package and you dive right in, or maybe you have to heat it in the microwave for 30 seconds, but there's no barrier to the consumption. And that reminded me of something, which is, how hungry do you think the guy who discovered oysters had to have been? I mean, he's like, look at all these dirty, nasty shells. I bet you this gray goop inside is really tasty. So maybe there's a diet strategy where, like, you could have as much oysters as you want, but you have to crack them yourself. Like, there's got to be some kind of a physical limit to getting at the food that therefore helps limit your consumption. But that's a Porter idea of weight loss. What's the real strategy? How do you put all this together for people in the book to show them how to effectively lose weight and then maintain a healthy weight?
Yeah, so there's several things. One is, just knowing about it, right? Because this is the whole thing that what people have been sold on is this idea of just eat less calories. You're going to lose weight. You have to lose weight. One, you don't have to lose weight, right? It's not physically necessary, because your body can just burn less calories if you eat fewer. But the other thing is that if you don't know what kind of hunger you're satisfying, right, then you're not going to be able to deal with it, right? So if you look at two different foods, for example, you have a 3-egg omelet, right? And vegetable omelet, it's maybe 800 calories. You eat that, you're full at least until lunch, maybe till dinner, because it's pretty big. You could then compare that to an 800 calorie Frappuccino. You'll be hungry like 5 minutes later. So why would you pretend that these two foods are the same, right? It's about the hormones that you're stimulating. It's not the calories. It's not just the calories. The calories stimulate. When you eat foods, you're stimulating certain hormones. So once you know about it, then you can say, okay, is it stimulating the right foods? Like, if it's stimulating a lot of insulin, like a lot of these refined calories, refined carbohydrates, you're going to stimulate a lot of insulin. But if that's not your problem, then that's, you have to set that aside. If your problem is cortisol, right, which is a different hormone, which is stress, right, then you have to say, let's deal with the stress, which is, meditation, yoga, that kind of thing, right? So the problem with calories is that, one, it's a very superficial understanding of weight gain. But two, it's sort of like to the man with the hammer, everything is a nail. Right? So it's like, oh, you're eating because of, you're depressed. Well, eat fewer calories. It's like, what? Don't you have to deal with the depression? Or like, you're not getting enough sleep, so that's why you're gaining weight. So eat fewer calories. It's like, what? Like, the problem was the sleep. Or you're under a lot of stress. That's why you're gaining weight. So eat fewer calories. Like, what? Like, that doesn't even make any sense. The problem was the stress, right? So you have to first identify the problem. And this is just basic medicine, right? Like, you have to identify what your problem is. Like, oh, it's a burst appendix. Now deal with it, right? You can't say this is the solution for everything, which is the whole calories idea, which is that there's one size fits all, right? And it's one strategy for everybody. Everything's a nail, right? So the first thing is to identify what type of hunger that you're feeling, right? Is it the homeostatic hunger? If it is, then what is it? Which hormone is it that's lacking, right? Say it's GLP-1. You're not getting enough satiety. Well, how do you boost that? Well, you could do things like eat more protein, for example, eat bulkier foods, because bulky foods, like if you have really like a big cauliflower or something, right? It's very bulky. It's a lot of water and there's a lot of fiber in that. But when you eat it, because it fills up your stomach, it's going to activate the baroreceptors in the stomach. It's going to tell your brain, stop eating, you're full, right? If you eat a lot of protein like the steak, it's going to activate that GLP-1. It's going to tell your brain you're full, right? And then you can stop eating, right? If you eat a lot of fiber, it actually goes to the colon. It gets turned into short chain fatty acids, which activate GLP-1. So once you identify the problem, then you can say, okay, this is my problem. This is my solution, right? Whether it's more protein or bulkier foods, or, there's a lot of different strategies that you can use. There's like 50 weight loss tips in the book, but if it's emotional eating, then it's a totally different toolkit, right? You can't just simply say, I'm going to change my food, because if you think your problem is your diet, you've already lost, because your problem was not the diet. Your problem was the hedonic hunger. And then the third type of hunger
so much of, sorry to interrupt, but it reminds me so much of the other book that was very popular maybe 5 years ago, The Body Keeps the Score. And, it's just talking to people that have severe emotional problems. Just counting the calories is that's keeping the score maybe, but it's not solving the problem.
Exactly. It's about getting to that sort of deeper level of understanding of the root cause. And there's a third problem you alluded to, where it's so easy to eat the foods, right? And there's something called conditioned hunger. And conditioned hunger is where you basically get trained to be hungry. So if you take, and the classic experiment is Pavlov's dogs, right? So when you give dogs food, they salivate, they get hungry. If you ring a bell and then give them food, they do the same thing. And pretty soon when you ring the bell, they start to salivate and get hungry, because you've paired the two things. You've conditioned people to be hungry. Now you think about what happens now, like people eat in the car, they eat in front of the computer, they eat in front of the TV, they eat when they're watching sports, they eat, when they're reading, they eat because it's breakfast time, because it's snack time, they go, when they get coffee, they eat, right? Every single thing now has been paired with food. So now every time you go anywhere, you see, oh, I'm riding on the car. Oh, I need to eat, right? Now you've created extra hunger, and then you're going to eat. And that's conditioned hunger, because you've paired the two things so closely. And people call this food noise, because you've created this, right? And you think back to the 70s, right? When there was none of this stuff, right? There was no eating in the car. There's no cup holders in the car. There's no eating in front of the TV. You always ate in the cafeteria, right? There's no snacks, right? None of the snacking business. So what happens is that it's a lot easier to stay thin, because there's none of this food noise. But that food noise is conditioned hunger, right? That's what it is. And if you identify it, then you can break those habits, right? Then you say, okay, well, my problem is that when I sit in front of the TV, I always get hungry. Now you've identified the problem. Then you say, okay, how can I switch my habit of eating chips in front of the TV to something else? You switch it for something else. But the advertising, the constant barrage of, TV shows, with like food TV shows, every show you have food, right? And again, that's not an accident. You're watching a cop show or something and there's food everywhere. Why? Because they've paid for product placement, right? It's no accident.
It's like ads. When people are smoking in outer space movies. Huh. Wonder how that worked.
Yeah, it was like the Truman Show, where every 2 seconds the person would say, "I love this food," or whatever. It was quite funny.
Dr. Fung, could we switch gears for a second? I wondered if I could ask you a question that's not related to your new book, which, by the way, again, is called The Hunger Code. And Brabsy, I'm sure we've got a link and some details that we can send to everybody. And look, I encourage everybody to buy this book. You're gonna learn tons about nutrition and health, even if you don't need to lose weight per se. And the first book that he wrote is great. I'm sure this one is going to be even better. So highly recommend. But the other thing that I know you're passionate about and interested in is this new technology around immunotherapy called CAR-T, CAR-T, CAR-T. Can you give me just an overview of what that is and how it may help in the fight against cancer?
Yeah, so CAR T is basically an engineered antibody to cancer cells. So it's a fascinating technology. And what I'm always sort of interested in the understanding behind sort of what works, right? And what happened in cancer is actually fascinating because it's sort of gone through several sort of paradigm shifts. So if you think about cancer, the first sort of paradigm is this sort of growth paradigm. That is, cancer is a cell that grows too much. So therefore, kill it, right? And the way to kill a cell is you can either, cut it out, you can radiate it, or you can poison it, right? And that's surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy. Problem is that there's a lot of sort of collateral damage that
Collateral
happens
damage, yeah.
with that. But that's the paradigm. And then in the 80s, we switched over to a genetic paradigm. So people were like, okay, and it gets to the sort of 3 whys, right? So cancer is a cell, it's bad because it grows too much. But why is it growing too much, right? And the answer is because it has mutations in the growth sections of that thing, right? And that was the sort of era of genetic medicine, right? And this is, you remember, with the Human Genome Project and all that sort of stuff. So in the 90s, there was a huge optimism that we were going to cure cancer because we figured out that, hey, cancer is just a genetic mutation. We can target these genetic mutations, and therefore we can cure cancer, right? Turned out we didn't cure cancer. There's a lot of optimism that we would, but the first few drugs were amazing, but then it quickly slowed down because it didn't turn out that there was just one mutation. We thought that, hey, breast cancer, there's this mutation that causes the breast cancer. Let's target this mutation. Turns out at the last count, so they did the Human Genome Project, remember, in 2000, Craig Venter and so on. And then they did an even more ambitious program called the Cancer Genome Atlas. And that was finished in like 2018 or something. And they took 40 or 50 different cancers and hundreds of and thousands of samples. And they said, let's catalog the genetic mutations. There wasn't 1 or 2. There was 6 million different mutations, right? That's an impossible task because you can't create 6 million drugs to target each of those mutations. And how are you going to, do it anyway? So this whole genetic paradigm really sort of failed to cure the cancer, even though we knew that cancers do have these genetic mutations. Because again, we didn't answer the question of why, right? Why are these cancers mutating? And the answer is that they weren't random mutations. Everybody thinks that they're random mutations, but they're anything but random because all cancers wind up looking the same. There's certain characteristics of cancer that are always the same. So if it's always the same, it's not a random mutation. It's a targeted mutation, which is evolution. Cancers are evolving. So normal cells are actually evolving under selective pressure to this sort of survival state, which is this more primitive state. And that's what's causing it. And the reason that's important is because they are basically evolving. You could almost consider them a new species of cell. So a breast cell will change and mutate into a breast cancer cell, even though it originally started from that, it's mutated into that. And your immune system now recognizes it as a separate species. That's why it gets targeted. And the thing is that these, because it is being kept in check by the immune system, that's why people with immune deficiencies, like HIV, develop a huge number of cancers. And once you realize that, then you can say, hey, we need to stop thinking about sort of the growth paradigm, which is how do we kill cells, right? How do we cut better? How do we radiate better? We need to get away from the genetic paradigm, which is we need to develop these genetic targets, and into this is the evolutionary paradigm of cancer. And this has been since about 2015. And what's fascinating to me is that almost nobody talks about it. I wrote about it in the Cancer Code, but nobody talks about this evolutionary paradigm of cancer, but is basically taking over all of cancer medicine. You look at all the new therapies, immunotherapies, that, the Keytrudas, all those top sellers, which are the biggest sellers of cancer medicines overall. And then this CAR T, which is a different spin, which is that, hey, let's enhance the immune system in a different way. So a lot of these other drugs that have been developed, the immune therapy drugs, they sort of uncover the ways that the cancer gets around the immune system. The CAR T is basically taking your own cells and then taking the cancer cells and then trying to engineer them into sort of more lethal weapons to target them. So again, a fascinating, paradigm shift in thinking about how cancers develop. The other super interesting thing about how this impacts investors and so on is that if you think about cancers and why they kill, it's because cancers spread, not because they get big, it's because they spread. And it was always assumed that cancers got to a certain size and then pieces broke off, and then that's what happens. But that's not actually what happens. The cancer starts spreading immediately, even before you can detect it on an MRI. It is shedding cancer cells. It's just that the immune system is destroying them so efficiently. And what happens is that when the cancer is small, it's shedding these cells, the cancers are getting killed off by the immune system. But every so often, one of them will survive and get back to the original cancer. But now it's undergone selective pressure, which means that it can now evolve into a different thing. And every time it goes out and survives a little bit better, every time it goes out, so now it evolves into a completely different species. The impact of that is that with the newer technology, you can now detect those early cancer cells, because those cancer cells are, one, very small in number, but two, last like an hour before they get wiped out by your immune system. But if you're sensitive enough, you can actually detect them early. And those are companies like Grail, which took a huge hit today, actually. But also, Guardant Health and Exact Sciences. And you see these companies up until today, for Grail anyway, have been like blowing the doors off. Because again, it's about understanding this new sort of evolutionary paradigm of cancer medicine. And again, the other thing as an investor anyway, to think about when you're looking at it is that you have to target what's important. So what's important in medicine these days is sort of two things, because the two biggest killers of Americans is cardiovascular disease and cancer. So the two biggest things is to make sure you're metabolically healthy, which is the type 2 diabetes and so on, which is why weight loss drugs are sort of the big money makers. And two is cancer medicine, because cancer is the big, that's the big bugaboo. It's killing a lot more people than, say, infections. Infections in the past, like TB and stuff, they used to kill a lot of pneumonia. They used to kill a lot of Americans, but they don't anymore. So therefore, there's not as much money going to be made in it. So cardiovascular medicine with the weight loss drug, that's why those things are exploding. Cancer medicines, but this whole idea of, taking these new sort of approaches is fascinating, because you can develop like incredibly important drugs. And now a lot of these CAR T drugs are actually they're getting approved. They're getting better. The technology is getting better. The first few were actually not that impressive. But because you're going on the right pathway, you just need to sort of sharpen up your tools and stuff. You can get real breakthroughs, and we're starting to see some real breakthroughs. But again, this paradigm didn't exist until about the 2010s, but it sort of is very hidden. But this whole cancer thing is fascinating to me, because it's like, there's a lot of colorectal cancer, for example, is growing in importance, and the question is why. And it's really interesting, because it comes back to the fact that if you look at what causes cancer, and they did studies of this ages ago, the biggest thing that causes cancer is tobacco smoking, at about 30%. But right behind it is diet. So in fact, all these things in our diet impact us. And it wasn't until 2000, really, that we recognize the link between obesity and cancer. So basically what we eat and weight loss and all these sort of things is going to impact, cancer to a bigger degree than we all expected. I had already
That's not good news for me. Well, Dr. Fung, I want to thank you very much for joining us today and talking about your new book, The Hunger Code. And I really appreciate the insight that you offered about the 3 different types of hunger. I think that can be really helpful for people who might have been on weight loss drugs but want to get off of them, or people maybe who have, done some kind of restrictive diet and now they've gotten to a healthier weight, and really help them learn to keep the weight off. My strategy was always, before I allowed myself to eat, I go for a 5-mile run. And that worked pretty well until I got to an age where my Achilles and my feet wouldn't let me do that every single day. But I think there are good behavioral strategies like that can help people, especially if they have a deeper understanding of why they keep getting hungry. So I think that's great insight, and I look forward to actually following up with you more about the CAR T drugs. I'd like to have an overview of where those are in the development stages and the companies behind them, because I think that'd be a very interesting area for us to study. So thanks again for being with us today.
Thanks so much, Porter. It's a pleasure.
What'd you think, Aaron?
I mean, he's approaching this from a radically different perspective, one that makes the most sense to me, and one that I haven't seen this approach before. And what I really like too is he's taking the blame away from the person, whereas that's 99% of these diets and all that is putting that fear that you're doing it wrong. And he's saying, no, there's actually 3 different types of hunger. And once you identify those, then you can correct them.
You know, you had a very good diet business about 10 years ago. And I know you sold tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of your diet program, and you helped a lot of people around the world lose weight. It seems like putting these principles into some kind of a program, it's, learning them in the book, but having some kind of an AI or some kind of an accountability system to help you manage them day to day, I think would really be a great service for people. It's something we should think about doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I also have friends that I'm sure if you've ever been on YouTube, you've seen their ads. It's the V-Shred guys. And my buddy Vince, he actually partnered up with Dr. Drew. And so now you see Dr. Drew on there, and they do 3 different kind of body types. It's like the ectomorph, the endomorph, or whatever the case is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think
I'm the megamorph. Is that a choice?
Well, I could tell you if we did like a quiz flow, because people love to learn about themselves and they want to figure out why they're struggling to lose weight. Well, the 3 different types of hunger that Dr. Fung has identified, man, that would be a home run. So yeah, Porter, let's talk to him. Let's talk to him about it. We might know something about marketing, just a little something.
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit.
And we might be able to reach a pretty wide audience. And you know what? That wide audience might need some financial advice too at some point. So, who knows?
Who knows? Maybe there's some opportunities here for us.
Okay, Porter. Well, that was a little bit of a long interview. And of course, we had our intro, which was fantastic. It was the Porter was right again.
Ringing that bell.
Even though we got, months and months of hate of emails telling you that you were dead wrong and that Trump was going to be the savior and that Musk was coming in and all this type of stuff. So anyways, we love the feedback and we love for our people to write, and it's podcast feedback at Porter and Company Research.com with the AND, not the little, sign. So that's podcast feedback at Porter and Company Research.com. By the way, you're always making predictions, Porter, and you're obviously the biggest prediction is this end of America thing is just like a freight train, just going full steam ahead. Unfortunately, I tell the story to everybody, and we talked about a little bit. I literally moved to Colombia 10 years ago because of your end of America thesis. I took it to heart when people laughed at it, when people mocked it, when people said, that's crazy that you're going to see a civil war uprising. That's crazy. You're going to see hyperinflation or stagflation and all these things.
And now we've got a communist in New York City, right? We have Chicago about to declare bankruptcy.
Yeah.
You've got the federal government that's on track to do a $3 trillion deficit this year with full employment. And when I started writing The End of America, the price of gold was maybe $1,000 an ounce.
Yeah, probably.
Now it's $5,000 an ounce. So you've lost 80% of your purchasing power. And if you think that's going to be good for society, just wait.
Yep. And it's all the things we talked about over time, and you were on this earlier. It's the degradation of society with the OnlyFans, with the gambling, with the legalizing weed. It's, we don't have much left. And as a matter of fact, I think they're playing the last card right now, which is the alien card. This actually came sooner than I thought. You know me, I'm the alien guy, and now Trump's about to try to play the alien card for more distraction and nonsense. But at the end of the day, you can't. What does Lynn Alden say? You can't stop this train.
There's no stopping this train. Yep, the spinning will continue.
Yeah, and we're happy to guide you guys through it. We love all of our subs, all of our followers, all of our listeners. And like I said, write us, please. Let us know your concerns. It's a scary world out there, and hopefully we can guide you through it to some financial independence and financial success, which we've been doing a fantastic job of at Porter & Company.
Yep. Thank you very much, Aaron. It's a great show, and we'll see everybody back again next month.
Yep. See you guys.
Thank you for listening to the Porter & Company Black Label Podcast with your hosts, Porter Stansberry and Aaron Brabham. We'll see you soon.